it's Jess. Guys, for those of you who've been around my channel for a while, you know that this is not my usual setup. Today it was really windy outside, so I just couldn't film. I'm actually sitting on my bedroom floor filming this, so apologies, it's not the best background. Tomorrow, hopefully when the weather's a lot better, I'll be able to film back outside and we've got some of the lovely trees behind us. But today the best we can do is my red door and the white wall. So today, guys, given it's Monday, I wanted to do a Monstera Monday video, and today's video is going to be care tips for the Monstera Standleyana. Now I've got two Monstera Standleyanas. I've got this guy here that I brought from outdoors and I'm hiding in my room, but I've got him here, and I've got my second Monstera, which is this little baby cutting here. And I know, guys, he doesn't look the best, but I'm kind of I guess I'm kind of glad I've got him as an example of the different pests Monsteras can face, because then hopefully that gives you guys a good reference point, particularly if you're coming across some pests for your Monstera. For all these videos, I like to start with a general characteristic and natural habitat for the plants. So the Monstera Standleyana is a member of the aroid family. It's a type of Monstera. Although fenestrations on the Monstera Standleyana is not as apparent, and actually for my bigger specimen, I can't actually see any fenestrations. The plant is not as large as some of the other members of the Monstera family. It's definitely a smaller cousin. However, these leaves can get up to sizes of about 6 inches long, so it's probably a little bit more bigger, but that's actually quite a big leaf. This guy is native to Central America, around the equator, so those are countries in Costa Rica, Honduras, Nicaragua. So this is a plant that's native to that region, and it is a vining plant. You will see it crawling up the trunks of a lot of rainforest trees or hanging from them. The Monstera Standleyanas I have at the moment are the elbow variegated ones. So these are the ones with the lovely white variegation. And the great thing about the Monstera Standleyana in terms of variegation is that whilst it does have flecks, as you can see on my specimen here, it more often than not can give you blocks of variegation as well. And of course the block variegation is becoming more and more popular these days. If you are on the market for a Monstera with a lot of variegation, my suggestion to you is always look at the stems to see if there's a lot of white variegation on those stems, because that will give you a sign if that plant is going to give you a lot more variegation. The Standleyana also comes in yellow variegation, although that's more of a rarer variegation and it's a little bit more difficult to find. I believe the yellow variegation is also known as the Monstera Standleyana aurea. Plant is toxic to pets and small children if ingested, because it does contain a high level of calcium oxate, which are the same minerals that create kidney stones. So if you do have small children or pets, just be sure not to let them munch on these leaves too much. This is a rarer type of houseplant, or a little bit more uncommon type of houseplant, but having said that, it's quite a tolerating species. So if you are on the market for a rarer type of houseplant, or you're looking to expand your collection with some more unusual plants, I highly recommend you getting the Monstera Standleyana, because it is quite an easy step into the rarer and more unusual plants to add to your collection. So guys, getting into the care tips, the first tip is around lighting. The Monstera Standleyana likes more bright indirect light, as a lot of aroids and tropical plants do. I keep my Standleyana in my greenhouse, which has a shade over it. It gets full indirect sunlight for the entirety of the day. This is also a plant that can tolerate a little bit more shade. So if you're keeping him indoors and you're just a little bit worried about not giving him as much light, as long as he gets a couple of hours of some bright indirect light, that should be quite good, because he can tolerate some shade. The only thing I'll call out here is, as we know with variegation, the more light you give your plant, the more this will encourage it to give off more variegation. So that's just something you might want to keep in mind. Also guys, I'm sorry if you hear some noises. It's actually my brother's gaming at the moment, and his bedroom is right next to my room, so if you do hear some very enthusiastic voices, that's just my brother gaming. You don't want to keep this guy in bright direct light because that will cause sunburn for this plant. And how you can identify sunburn is that you'll start to have a lot of brown and yellow splodges on its leaves. From a temperature perspective, as this plant is native to Central America, really in that equator region, ideal temperatures for it is between 21 to 26 degrees, which is 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So to the extent that you can replicate those temperatures, that will be great for this plant. It can tolerate some lower temperatures, and in fact I'm keeping mine outdoors in the greenhouse outside. It gets to lows of about 11 degrees now as we get to the end of winter, and so I'm just keeping my eye out for this plant, just making sure if he does brown a little, that might be a sign for me to keep him indoors at night because it'll get too cold for him. Obviously if you keep it in warmer temperatures, it will grow a lot more, so that's also something you might want to keep in mind, particularly if you want to encourage some more growth on your plant. In terms of watering for this plant, a reason why this plant can be super tolerant is because you don't have to be as strict on your watering schedule compared to other aroids. So this plant, a good tip is to let your soil dry out before you water him, because he doesn't like to be in too soggy a medium, because that will also encourage root rot for this plant. So I let my plant dry out completely before I water him, and normally because it's quite cold now during autumn, I've been watering him once every week. The tip there is always look at his soil, stick your finger in, or if you have a moisture meter, use that, because if it's too moist then you don't want to water him. The alternative is, because I've got this moss pole here, what you can do is you can just water the moss pole, because that will encourage his aerial roots to form, and it will also give your plant water and nutrients it needs from its aerial roots without jeopardizing the roots in the soil. So what I do is I either tip this guy slightly on an angle and I get my watering can and I just water the pole, or I get a spray and I really spray and drench this moss pole. Sign to tell if your Standleyana needs watering or not is its leaves will start to curl backwards, and I can show you what that looks like with this cutting right here. You see how that leaf is curling up? That is a sign that your plant needs to be watered. And as I mentioned in the beginning, why this is quite a tolerant plant is because it can dry out a little bit more but still bounce back. Obviously I don't recommend you to let your plant dry out because it's not good for the health of your plant, but this cutting I've let it dry out multiple times, and every time I've given it some water it's really bounced back. Even though I know he looks terrible at the moment, but even in his form like this he will bounce back quite well. And actually, I don't do this to your plants guys, I'm just doing this so you can see as an example, but I was planning to do this video and I saw yesterday that this leaf was curling up and I was like, oh, should I water him yesterday or should I wait until I do this video today and then water him, because I really wanted to show you guys how the leaf will curl when it needs water. In terms of humidity for this plant, I've heard that this plant enjoys a humidity of above 60%, and if it doesn't get a humidity it will get brown tips on its leaf. However, from my experience that hasn't happened for this plant, and I know I definitely keep it in lower than 50% humidity, just because I keep my plant indoors and I don't have a great greenhouse that will hold in the humidity and moisture. But it seems to do okay. I'm sure if you do give your plant some humidity, particularly if you're keeping it in quite a warm environment, I'm pretty sure your plant will enjoy it and it'll probably grow a lot quicker and a lot bigger if you give it those conditions. But if you don't have the right conditions to give it humidity, I wouldn't be too worried about it. In terms of soil, as this plant is a climber, I will recommend an aroid mix. So that's generally 70% of orchid bark or coconut coir. Is that how you say it, by the way? Coconut coir or coconut core mix. Then I put I think, if I got my percentages right, probably 10 to 15% perlite, and the remaining 10 to 15% of organic potting mix, because you just want to make sure that your medium is well draining enough so it doesn't encourage root rot. Also guys, just as a general tip, for my cutting you might see some eggshells in there. As a bit of kitchen gardening for you, I put some eggshells in my cuttings because eggshells contain calcium and calcium help roots to grow. So I chuck that in the mix for my Monstera cutting. When it comes to pests, biggest pests in my experience for this plant are spider mites and mealybugs. I've been undergoing an ongoing battle with spider mites with my Monstera cutting. So guys, if you can see here, these little holes, this yellowing and browning is a symptom of spider mites. How you can tell there are spider mites is if you start to see little cobwebs around the base of your plant and near the soil around that plant, that is a sign that your plant has spider mites. And also if you do notice these holes, this is another symptom that there might be spider mites around your plant. The reason why I have my sad little cutting here is to just show you an example of what spider mite damage looks like, so that you can recognize it for yourself and hopefully be assured that because the Monstera Standleyana is a very tolerant plant, that more often than not you should be able to save it. And to treat this, recommend is you change the soil for your plant. So completely get rid of the soil that the plant was originally sitting in with the spider mites. You want to wash the roots quite thoroughly and pot it new. I would then spray the plant with a mix of soapy water. I do 2 pumps of hand wash in a standard spray, and I shake it up and then I spray it on that plant. You need to make an effort to spray it on your plants every day just to make sure the spider mites disappear. So as a reference guys, I've had to change the soil for my Monstera cutting for about 3 times, because even when I thought I had the spider mites under control, after a couple of days it was as if it never left in the first place. So I had to change the soil 3 times, and every day I consistently went and started spraying this cutting. Cutting originally had 5 leaves, but now it's down to 2, because another thing guys is when you see your leaves become a little worse for wear, which is when it just goes completely brown, you have to cut those leaves off, because those leaves are harboring the bacteria, it's harboring the pests, so you have to cut those leaves off to ensure the survival of the rest of your plant. My Standleyana has been spider mite free, but I've just got to make sure that I am keeping on top of checking for pests, just so I can help this little guy grow. But guys, this guy is a testament for how strong the Standleyana is, because he's gone through spider mites not once, not twice, but 3 times. He survived that, and he survived my negligence of letting him dry out more than 5 times guys, but he's still clinging on for life. Guys, if you are in the market for a rarer plant, I would highly suggest getting the Monstera Standleyana, because it is a more uncommon plant that has variegation, but it is definitely a lot more tolerant. In terms of encouraging growth guys, my biggest tip is to give your plant a pole to climb on, because that mimics the natural habitat that your plant enjoys. So if you give it a moss pole, you'll notice its leaves start to become a bit bigger. Having said that, I know that people can keep the Standleyana as hanging plants or trailing plants, but for those ones the leaves will probably be a little bit more smaller. In terms of pricing for these guys, in Australia these guys can retail between $60 to $120. I got mine for $60 from a nursery based in the eastern side of Australia called Noraville, and I got mine for $60, and he's quite a big specimen. And for cuttings, guys, I've seen them on Facebook between $30 to $60. $60 is probably a little bit too much, considering you could probably get a full-size plant for this. I hope that is a good reference point for you in terms of just knowing what price point you should be paying for the Standleyana. This guy is a very rewarding plant. I really like my Standleyana because I think it's very forgiving, particularly my little cutting there. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions regarding care tips, please leave them in the comments below or drop me a DM on my Instagram at JessiePotplants. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. It's day 8 of my 30 days of plant video uploads. I hope you're enjoying it, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!